I am Salah Hassan, and I'm the director of the Africa Institute in Sharjah. And I'm also a professor of visual arts and art history, mostly specializing in African and African diaspora art. I'm the curator of this show, Gavin Jantjes, to be free. The work that we're going to discuss today, it's an untitled work from a series that is called the Zulu series. And it's central to this show for reasons that I will explain. First of all, the Zulu series came out of Gavin's interest in really in the shift of his work to explore more figurative art, but based on series. And the series really is an investigation of African heritage. It doesn't mean that he changed his style. It was a new venture in which he tried to treat subjects that related to African heritage in discourse with his own work, but he's also in discourse with modernism and contemporary art in general. So the Zulu itself meant the space above, which means the sky. And for Gavin, the sky means the equality of all human being, despite the disparities, the inequalities that are caused by slavery or colonialism. And especially in the context of South Africa, it was the system of apartheid, which is one of the most brutal system of racial segregation that has been legalized since, ironically, the year that Gavin himself was born. So the Zulu, and across the work, the series itself, but even across several artwork, you'll find that the cosmological system, which was the investigation of it for him based on African culture, meant the equality of beings, but also meant that is an interest in cosmology itself from an African perspective. So that is very important as a background to this work. But the most important aspect of this work is when you look at the composition of it and the figures itself. That is, they are set in, of course, in a vast star or cosmos with one figure, which is the mask. And the mask is can be culturally actually located to the, or at least as part of the Fang culture in Gabon today. And the Fang are very much as part of, like, especially in their artistic production, are part of a group of cultures that actually influence Cubism. And you could see clearly the Cubist nature of that mask. The way he used it is in the context of a citation, let's call it, a figure from Mademoiselle d'Avignon by Picasso. It's a very famous piece that is always cited as influenced by African sculpture and mask. But in the context of the discourse on colonial modernism, which is Picasso is part of, these masks or these African figures has always been discussed as appendix to this kind of classical work of modernism. So in this case, the celebration is there, but it was in the context of what came to be known as primitivism, which is a trope within Western modernism. So it locates African work as an appendix, not equal. So in a conference, actually, to situate this and to contextualize it in Gavin Jantjes' thinking, in a context in Gaborone, which actually shepherded with a group of anti-apartheid activists in the art and culture arena. It was called Art and Culture for Liberation. And to which it's a historic show, it's a historic conference, sorry. It happened in 1982. And to which many people who were part of the anti-apartheid movement, among others, who actually attended it. So Gavin, at that specific conference, to tell you about his thinking then, and that could be a background to this work, is that he said, or he argued for the equality of classical African art tradition with Western modernism, that it shouldn't be taken as an appendix, it should be liberated from the tropes of primitivism. So when you see this dialogue between the mask and the mask figure, because the mask actually that is used in Picasso's painting is inspired by these masks, which happen to be available in museums all over Europe, especially like the Trocadero and others, where non-Western art has accumulated in the West in the so-called ethnographic museum, which are basically the source of these. So at the time, the vision is for African artists as a tribal artist, they can produce work, but they can't think about it. They can't produce discourse around it. So it was almost like an unconscious production that is timeless, that is produced in the same and reproduced because of the primitive mind that was viewed at the time as typical of the African mind and non-Western people, including native people in the United States, Oceania, among other places. So in the figure itself, there is an umbilical cord, a white umbilical cord that comes out of the mouth of the mask and circle the Picasso's figure, which is among other figures that are not actually here, and circle back to the nostril. The umbilical cord is definitely well known as a source of life, as a source of nutrition, as a sort of life in itself that gives that figure the life itself. But when you look at them in the context of the whole cosmological chart, the sky with the stars, it signals co-evilness in a sense that it signaled that equality. So for Gavin, as you can see it in the other, he made it his mission to use that cosmological background, that kind of sky, the chart, and the idea of we all live under the same sky as a background to discuss this relationship between African art and colonial modernist production, and thereby, in that kind of context, liberating the African object from the kind of imprisonment of being an appendix to the larger modernist discourse.